So in the story, the word clogged is describing Farmer Bean's ears, but you can use it in other contexts, other situations. For example, you can say a sink was clogged. The sink was clogged, so the water wasn't draining. So there's probably lots of food at the bottom of the sink, which means that the water can't get through it to drain. Okay, so let's carry on reading. Here we go. So, Bean rubbed the back of his neck with a dirty finger. He had a boil coming there and it itched. What we need on this job, he said, is machines, mechanical shovels. We'll have him out of here in 5 minutes with mechanical shovels. Oh, what does he mean by mechanical shovels? Well, we know that they've been digging with some shovels and it's taken them a very long time and they are very tired and they're getting very cross. Now, they've been doing that by hand and it hasn't worked, has it? So what do you think mechanical might mean? Well, mechanical is an adjective because it describes the shovels. And it has 4 syllables. Wow, this is a long word. You ready to clap them with me? Mechanical. There we go. And it means that it's run by a machine. So, for example, you could have a robot, a toy robot, and you turn the key at the side and then it moves. That is mechanical because it's run by a machine. You don't have to do it yourself. All you need to do is turn the key. Okay, so the shovel is automatic, okay, which is a synonym of mechanical. It is mechanical, so they don't have to do all the hard work themselves. All they probably have to do is turn a couple of dials to get the shovel to work. Okay, so they're going to use mechanical shovels. I wonder how they're going to get on. This was a pretty good idea, and the other 2 had to admit it. All right then, Bean said, taking charge. Boggis, you stay here and see the fox doesn't escape. Bunce and I will go and fetch our machinery. If he tries to get out, shoot him quick. The long, thin Bean walked away. The tiny Bunce trotted after him. The fat Boggis stayed where he was with his gun pointing at the foxhole. Now it tells us here that Bunce trotted after Bean. Now, Bean's probably walking very quickly because he wants to go and get what he needs. So how do you think Bunce is going to be walking after him? Well, he's probably going to be running to try and keep up, isn't he? So yes, trot is a verb because it's describing what Bunce is doing. And yes, it means that he's running with small steps. And if you trot, it's not the fastest you can go, but it's not the slowest you can go. So it's in the middle. So he's having to put some effort in to trot after him. And some antonyms for this are crawl, because that's very slowly, creep, and saunter. Now, saunter means when you're walking leisurely. Remember, if you're walking leisurely, you don't have anywhere to go and you're doing it for enjoyment. So you definitely wouldn't be trotting. You would be walking nice and slowly. Now, the word trot is sometimes associated with a certain animal, a horse, because you can say the horse trotted across the field because a horse can walk, it can trot, and it can also gallop. So gallop's the fastest it can go and walking is the slowest. Trotting is in the middle. So it's kind of running but not going as quickly as a gallop. So there you go. That is what Farmer Bunce is doing. He is running, he's trotting behind Farmer Bean to try and catch up with him. So it's almost like that he's comparing him to an animal, isn't it? Okay, let's carry on reading our next page. Soon, 2 enormous caterpillar tractors with mechanical shovels on their front ends came clanking into the wood. Bean was driving one, Bunce the other. The machines were both black. They were murderous, brutal-looking monsters. Okay, now it says that the machines are clanking. So clanking is probably a noise. But what does clanking mean? Well, let's have a look. So it says that the 2 enormous caterpillars came clanking into the wood. So clank is a verb because it's describing what the 2 enormous caterpillars, or the shovels, as it's referring to, are doing. Okay, it has 1 syllable. Clap along with me. 3, 2, 1, clank. And it means to make a short, loud sound. So you know when you have 2 pieces of metal and you hit them together, that makes a clanking noise. So when you have 2 spoons and you hit them together and it makes that little noise, that is clanking. Or when we're in the playground and I ring the bell, that makes a clanking noise because the part in the middle that I'm moving around is metal and the bell is metal as well, so it makes a clanking noise. Now, some synonyms for this are clatter and rattle. Okay, and like I said, you can use it in other contexts other than talking about the mechanical shovel. So you could say he could hear the bells clanking in the distance. So clanking is the noise that the bell is making because it's two pieces of metal hitting each other. Okay, so let's carry on reading. Here we go then, shouted Bean. Death to the fox, shouted Bunce. The machines went to work, biting huge mouthfuls of soil out of the hill. The big tree under which Mr. Fox had dug his hole in the first place was toppled like a matchstick. On all sides, rocks were sent flying and trees were falling, and the noise was deafening. Oh, so it describes the noise as deafening. What do you think deafening might mean? Because the rocks were sent flying and the trees were falling, so it's probably making quite a lot of noise, wasn't it? Well, yes, deafening is describing the noise, so it's an adjective. It has 3 syllables, deafening, and it means so loud it's impossible to hear anything else. So some synonyms of this are blaring. So if some music is blaring, it means it's so loud that you can't hear anything else. And again, ear shattering. So it's almost so loud that it's going to shatter your eardrum if you hear it anymore, if you listen to it anymore. Now, an antonym of this is definitely quiet, because we know that the shovels are making lots of noise. So therefore, they're definitely not being quiet, are they? And as I said, we can describe music when it's very loud as deafening, because it's almost so loud that you can't hear anything else. You can't hear the person next to you speaking or anything. So there we go. It describes how noisy the mechanical shovels were. Down in the tunnel, the foxes crouched, listening to the terrible clanging and banging overhead. What's happening, Dad? Cried the small foxes. What are they doing? Mr. Fox didn't know what was happening or what they were doing. It's an earthquake, cried Mrs. Fox. Look, said one of the small foxes. Our tunnel's got shorter. I can see daylight. They all looked round, and yes, the mouth of the tunnel was only a few feet away from them now, and in the circle of daylight beyond them, they could see the 2 huge black tractors almost on top of them. Tractors! Shouted Mr. Fox, and mechanical shovels! Dig for your lives! Dig, dig, dig! Okay, so now we've read the chapter, we are going to do some inference questions on it. So here is your first inference question. Remember, we use clues in the text and our own knowledge to answer. So how can you tell that the farmers had been digging for a long time? Give 2 reasons. So let's look at this question and highlight the keywords. So how can you tell? So tell is a key word because we're using inference, so we're not told explicitly how the farmers, so we're looking at the farmers and the fact that they are digging. And we're looking for what tells us the farmers had been digging for a long time. We need to give 2 reasons. Now let me read the part of the story to you, the beginning of the chapter where we're going to find this. As the sun rose the next morning, Boggis and Bunce and Bean were still digging. They had dug a hole so deep you could have put a house into it, but they had not yet come to the end of the fox's tunnel. They were all very tired and cross. So we know that the farmers started digging at night because that's when Mr. Fox comes out to get his food. So the fact that it is when the sun rose the next morning and they're still digging, that will tell us that they've been digging for a long time. And they had dug a hole so deep you could put a house into it. Wow, so think of all that effort that's gone into that hole that they've dug. That must have taken a very long time to dig a hole big enough to put a house into it. And also, they were very tired. So therefore, that tells us that they've been digging for a very, very long time. So let's have a look how I would answer this question. So I found 3 parts of the story that tell me that they've been digging for a long time. The fact that the sun rose the next morning, their hole was so deep they could put a house into it, and they were all very tired. So it's looking for 2 reasons. So I'm going to show you my first reason that I put. The first clue that tells us that the farmers have been digging for a long time is, okay, so that's my first part of the sentence. Remember, we always write in full sentences. As the sun rose the next morning, okay? The first clue which tells us that the farmers had been digging for a long time is as the sun rose the next morning. So I've taken that green part out of the text. I've just lifted it straight out of the text. So therefore, that proves that they've been digging a long time. And I've used exactly what I've read to help me prove this. We know from the previous chapter that they started digging at night time when Mr. Fox went to get his food, and therefore they had been digging all night. So that is me further explaining. So I've said I know that the sun rose the next morning, but then I also know from previous chapters that they've been digging all night because they normally go and get food at night time. Okay, so that's my first reason. Now I need to have another reason, don't I? So my second reason, again, I've started my sentence, written in a full sentence. The second clue, which tells us that the farmers had been digging for a long time, is, and then again, I've quoted from the text, so deep you could have put a house into it. The fact that the hole was that deep shows that they had been digging for a long time. So look, I've started my sentence with a full sentence. I've used a quote from the text to help me, and I've further explained it. So the fact that it's so deep a house could fit into it shows that they've been digging for a long time. But also, if you wanted to change one of those answers, because remember it says give 2 reasons. So I've only given 2 reasons. But if you wanted to give another reason, you could also say the fact that they're very tired. Okay, so here is another question. Why did Boggis and Bunce stare at Bean? So why? We're giving a reason. Did Boggis and Bunce, so we're looking at why those two in particular and why they stared. Okay, now here is the part of the text that tells us this. They were all tired and cross. Dang and blast, said Boggis. Whose rotten idea was this? Bean's idea, said Bunce. Boggis and Bunce both stared at Bean. So what do we know from this part of the story so far? Well, we know that they had not yet come to the end of the fox's tunnel. And we also know that they asked, whose rotten idea was this? That's what Boggis said. So how do you think they're feeling towards Bean, whose idea it was in the first place? Well, it was Bean's idea. So we know they had not yet come to the end of the fox's tunnel. So their aim of their plan was to catch Mr. Fox, but they hadn't done that. And it was Bean's idea. So as I said, how do you think they are feeling towards Bean, who came up with this plan that isn't working? And then why, for this reason, do you think they might be staring at him? So what I'd like you to do now is we've spoken about this question. So we've looked at what we know. We know that they've not yet come to the end of the fox's tunnel and that it was Bean's idea. And we've tried to think about how they might be feeling towards Bean and therefore why they would stare. So what I'd like you to do now is go and have a look at your questions. So this is your second question and you can fill it out based on what we've said. Remember, full sentences, use a quote from the text and then explain. And then you have some more questions about inference from this chapter that I'd like you to complete independently. Okay, Year 2, well, have a lovely rest of your day and I'll see you in our next reading lesson. Bye.